9 a.m. and the first item on the daily agenda of the National Convention of Priests. All 400 delegates officiating together in the ancient, beautiful ritual of the Catholic Mass. But if the ritual is ancient, the occasion is fundamentally modern. From 3 days of discussion has emerged the first priests' union in the history of the Australian Church, giving the priests for the first time the chance to have a real say in the way that church is run. They represent every shade of opinion, every age group, and while deciding what sort of association would best suit their needs, they've been thrashing out the major problems facing the church today and facing the priests themselves. And if there were lapses of concentration during morning Mass, there were good reasons for them.
Christ was never part of the establishment, you know. I think one of the things most wrong with the church is that it seems to have got away from Christ's teachings. You know, what we're trying to do, I think, many of us, is to bring the church back to the simple message that Christ preached, you know, love of God and love of neighbour.
I've been ordained nearly 5 years, and in that time, 4 of our class have left the priesthood, which we really think is tragic, and we feel it a lot because...
How many in the class?
20 in the class.
So that's 25%?
Yeah, just on.
20%? Why?
Well, it's hard to know, put it at a basic, you can't say one reason or the other, but they've said before they've gone, they've tended to say that the system didn't allow them to express themselves as they wanted to.
For a vocal minority, the position was serious. They saw themselves as disenfranchised members of an ailing church, a church increasingly unrelated to a rapidly changing world, ruled by an authoritarian hierarchy which turned deaf, conservative ears to their pleas for a new kind of ministry. But at this convention, the hierarchy had to listen. Even though only 6 of Australia's 30 bishops accepted invitations, never before had young priests like these been able to present their views on such equal terms.
Our style of life is very, very inflexible. Our dress, our title, our celibate life, all of these things are so fixed that they make us more conscious of being a priest, more sort of role conscious, than pretty well any other professional group in our community. And so if we can try to break out of this, at least in this meeting in the next couple of days, to try to see ourselves as our priesthood in terms of service, of a service going out to those people who depend upon us so much. You can't really communicate with them until they accept you as a person, and they don't accept this inflexible, shell-like role that everything in our life suggests to them. They don't see you, they see your collar, they see your life, they see where you live.
I don't agree with that. I think that was true one time, that people at one stage relied more upon sort of groups in a community, a person's particular status. Now, that
the convention was remarkable for its free and open discussion of ideas. Never in the history of the Australian Church, long suspicious of the press and never one to air its washing in public, have such formal discussions like these been heard by outsiders. And if the bishops present chose to, on the whole, keep silent and listen, they were ready to admit the value of the exercise. Bishop Muldoon.
It's impressed me very much. I'm learning a lot. I really am. It's good.
What have you learned?
It's good to sit down the back where I am sitting and to hear the views that have been expressed by the priests, young and old, because it teaches me to be aware of the thinking that's going on in the minds of the priests. Their concern will help me, therefore, to do my job better as a bishop.
But the topic of priest versus hierarchy far from dominated the convention. Many of the priests were meeting each other for the first time. Conflicts developed between the activists who wanted power and change and those who came to protect their traditional Mother Church against the radical threat within.
When one saw the priests at the concelebrated Mass and felt one's heart lifted up by the singing throughout the Mass, one felt regret that we were not all completely united in our work and in our attitude to the work of the priesthood, because some of the priests, good men no doubt, are more concerned with what the Church has always considered to be secondary work and not given a priority to that which should come first, which is the knowledge and love of Almighty God. And
What are they putting first?
well, they're putting social welfare first, maybe racism.
People, in other words.
People, yes, people.
But for many of the young priests, the crucial question at the convention was the nature of the association to be formed, and the extent to which it could pressure for the grassroots reform they consider so desperately needed.
I would like to see personally as many priests as possible from all over the nation meeting together, say once in 3 years. I think this would be a fair thing. In the meantime, that there would be meetings on a regional or interdiocesan level. But I think if all the priests of Australia were invited to a convention like this every 3 years, well, for the next few years anyway, a lot of good could come out of it.
Assuming that, say, an association is formed and it has all the trappings, say, of a trade union of priests, how much power are you prepared to let them have?
Well, I don't think you can answer that very precisely, because I think things have to unfold. There are certain basic structures that certainly can't be tampered with. But there is a great... those structures that have been given to the Church by Christ, for example. You can't do without, we would say, we Catholics. You can't do without the papacy. You can't do without the episcopate in the Church. You have the priesthood in the Church, and so on, eh? These are basic things.
The matter even of revelation and understanding what...
After this week, the Church will never be the same again. For 2,000 years, its structure has been hierarchical, and now the priests have organised. This is Father Julian Miller, a moderate, and the Sydney theologian responsible for the Priests' Convention. He's likely to be the association's first president. Here you have a group of priests who are forming what a lot of people would call a power group, a pressure group. Now, doesn't this run counter to the whole history of the Church? It's always been the Pope, the bishops, and then the priests.
Well, of course, as we've explained, we're not quite sure yet what we're forming, but it will be, in some sense, an element that's contributing to the life of the Church in Australia.
And in fact, pulling away at that superior-inferior relationship that's run through the Church all the way through.
Well, certainly this superior-inferior relationship, that's part of our whole social history. You know, it goes back to the days of monarchy and all the rest of it.
But it's changing now.
And it is changing now, and it's part of our changing world.
The Mass is over, and so is the convention. An association of priests will be formed. And just how effective it will be depends not so much on these men as on the 3,400 priests in Australia who didn't attend. The backbone of the Australian Church remains the professional cleric, the parish priest, usually conservative, the man who builds the churches and schools and gets them paid for. An association which reflected the majority opinion then would be a conservative one. But there's one thing the Church can't ignore. In the past few years, more than 100 men have left the priesthood, and the number is increasing. Enrolments in the seminaries are falling off rapidly, and so are church attendances. The Church is going to have to try something new, and many people see an association of priests as a new and hopeful beginning.